The end of the leader contaminated by radiation. A universal lesson for humanity. Before we begin, if you enjoy in-depth discussions on world affairs, psychology, leadership, and history, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with others. Your support helps these conversations reach more people and encourages thoughtful discussion on important global issues. Now, let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today we will examine an important question that lies at the intersection of psychology, international politics, and philosophy. Why do some political leaders appear overwhelmingly powerful within their own countries, yet seem far less influential on the global stage? To answer this question, we must first recognize the difference between domestic authority and international legitimacy. The Russia-Ukraine war has resulted in millions of casualties and immense human suffering. While this tragedy has dominated international headlines, other alleged human rights concerns around the world often receive far less global attention. This contrast raises an important question about how the international community chooses what to notice and what it overlooks. Our discussion today focuses on the psychology of political power, rather than on any single event alone. The argument presented is that some leaders exercise extensive control within their own countries. They may intervene in economic decisions, pressure the media, investigate critics, and apply laws unevenly, while cultivating an image of unquestioned authority. Inside their own political systems, such actions can reinforce the perception that their power is absolute. However, international politics operates according to a very different set of rules. On the world stage, influence is not determined solely by domestic authority. It depends on credibility, reputation, diplomatic trust, and the willingness of other nations to cooperate. International respect cannot simply be commanded, it must be earned. This difference creates an important psychological phenomenon. When a leader becomes accustomed to operating without meaningful opposition at home, there is a risk that confidence gradually transforms into overconfidence. The image, carefully constructed inside the country, may not survive contact with the broader international community, where every action is judged by multiple governments, institutions, and global public opinion. From the perspective of psychology, this illustrates the tension between ego and reality. Excessive power can encourage the belief that one's own judgment is always correct, and that criticism itself is illegitimate. Such thinking may gradually isolate leaders from objective feedback and distort their perception of reality. From the perspective of international politics, reputation becomes a nation's strategic asset. Trust built over many years can disappear quickly when credibility is questioned. Diplomatic influence ultimately rests not on fear alone, but on consistency, reliability, and respect from other nations. Eastern philosophy offers another way of understanding this phenomenon. It reminds us that illusion and reality inevitably collide. Images created through power cannot permanently replace objective truth. Eventually, every leader, institution, and nation must confront reality as it truly exists rather than as they wish it to appear. The broader lesson extends well beyond politics. The psychological trap of unchecked power can emerge in governments, corporations, organizations, and even families. Whenever authority exists without accountability, the temptation to mistake personal certainty for objective truth becomes stronger. History repeatedly reminds us that sustainable leadership is built not merely on power, but on humility, self-reflection, credibility, and the willingness to listen to opposing voices. As we conclude today's lecture, let us return to the central question that has guided our discussion. What ultimately becomes of a person who allows power to eclipse conscience? What happens when authority replaces humility, when domination replaces empathy, and when illusion becomes more convincing than reality? The symbolic wisdom of the Tibetan Book of the Dead offers a profound answer. Whether one interprets its teachings spiritually, philosophically, or psychologically, its central message remains timeless. The power you wield in this world is temporary. The suffering you inflict upon others however, becomes part of the moral landscape through which you must eventually travel yourself. In other words, no exercise of power is ever isolated from its consequences. Every act of arrogance shapes character. Every abuse of authority leaves an imprint not only upon society, but also upon the person who commits it. The image of a leader standing alone in the corner of an international banquet hall should therefore not be dismissed as a mere diplomatic embarrassment. It represents something far deeper. It symbolizes the invisible consequences of years spent silencing others, dismissing criticism, and severing genuine human connection. The isolation witnessed by the world is not merely political. It is psychological. It is moral. And, in the symbolic language of karma, it is the visible reflection of countless invisible choices, accumulated over time. One might even describe it as a moment in which the consequences of one's own actions return with unmistakable clarity. Like a boomerang, every act of exclusion eventually circles back toward the one who first set it in motion. What was once imposed upon others becomes one's own lived experience. In that sense, the banquet hall becomes more than a diplomatic venue. It becomes a stage upon which the hidden architecture of character is revealed before the eyes of the world. Criminologists have long observed a similar pattern. Many notorious offenders believe they have constructed the perfect fortress against accountability. They trust in fear. They trust in manipulation. They trust in power. Yet, more often than not, they ultimately discover that the strongest walls they built were not around themselves, but within themselves. Those walls become prisons of loneliness. The very strategies that once appeared to guarantee survival gradually separate them from trust, friendship, honesty, and ultimately from reality itself. Political isolation, then, can be understood as one visible expression of a much deeper internal collapse. It is not necessarily the beginning of destruction. Rather, it is often the final symptom of a process that has been unfolding for many years beneath the surface. And here lies the true value of today's discussion. This lecture is not ultimately about presidents, prime ministers, or famous political figures. It is about every one of us. Most of us will never govern a nation, yet nearly all of us exercise some form of authority. We influence our families. We supervise colleagues. We manage employees. We teach students. We lead organizations. Even within our closest relationships, we possess the ability either to nurture or to dominate. The essential question, therefore, becomes, how do we use whatever power has been entrusted to us? Do we listen when others disagree? Do we welcome honest criticism? Or do we silence uncomfortable voices simply because they threaten our pride? Before condemning the failures of distant leaders, we must first examine the kingdoms we govern ourselves. Am I becoming a tyrant within my own home? Do I rule my workplace through fear rather than respect? Have I mistaken authority for superiority? These questions demand courage. For one day, every title will disappear. Every office will be surrendered. Every uniform, every business card, every badge of rank, and every symbol of worldly status will eventually lose its meaning. When that day arrives, what will remain is neither political office nor public reputation. What remains is character. If our relationships have been built upon intimidation rather than compassion, we may discover a different kind of isolation, one in which no title can compel genuine affection, and no authority can purchase authentic respect. In the symbolic language of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, such isolation resembles a bardo created not by fate, but by one's own habits of mind. Whether interpreted literally or metaphorically, the lesson is unmistakable. The prisons we fear most are often the ones we construct ourselves. How then can we protect ourselves from this invisible contamination of the soul? Perhaps the answer is surprisingly simple. We begin by setting aside the inflated image of the self. We learn to listen before we command. We seek understanding before demanding obedience. We recognize the dignity of those who disagree with us. Above all, we remain humble before the moral law that governs every human life. Power may command obedience. Humility inspires trust. Power may silence criticism. Wisdom invites honest dialogue. Power may dominate for a season. Character endures long after authority has vanished. That is the enduring lesson offered by psychology, philosophy, history, and the symbolic teachings we have explored today. May we never become so intoxicated by authority that we lose the ability to recognize our own reflection. May we never mistake fear for respect. May we never confuse isolation with strength. And may we always choose conscience over domination, truth over illusion, and compassion over pride. Thank you sincerely for joining me in today's special lecture. If you found this discussion meaningful, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and sharing it with others who enjoy thoughtful conversations about psychology, philosophy, history, and international affairs. Your support enables us to continue creating in-depth, educational content that explores the human condition through the lenses of classical wisdom and modern scholarship. Until our next lecture, thank you for watching. Stay curious, stay humble, and continue seeking truth with both reason and compassion.